The airport buzzed with energy as travelers rushed to their gates, dragging suitcases behind them. Among them was 10-year-old Amara Johnson, her dark eyes wide with excitement as she clutched her little pink backpack. This wasn't just any trip, it was her very first time flying alone. Her parents stood with her at the security checkpoint, giving her last-minute reminders. "Remember, sweetheart," her mom said, straightening Amara's jacket collar. "Keep your boarding pass and ID in the front pocket of your backpack." Her father knelt down to her level. "And don't forget, we paid extra for that window seat so you can see the clouds. Seat 14A is yours, no matter what anyone says." Amara nodded seriously. She had been counting down the days until this moment. Her solo journey to visit Grandma and Grandpa in Atlanta. At school, she had already told all her friends about it. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had even helped her class make a travel journal, so Amara could document everything she saw from above the clouds. "I'll be fine, Dad," she said with the confidence of a child who had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. "I'm almost 11, you know." Her parents exchanged a smile over her head. Their little girl was growing up so fast. "We know, baby," her mom said, giving her one last hug. "Call us as soon as you land, okay? Grandma and Grandpa will be waiting." Right at the gate. With final kisses and waves, Amara joined the line of passengers being escorted by an airline employee who was responsible for unaccompanied minors. The woman, whose name tag read Lena, had a kind smile and colorful butterfly pins on her uniform vest. "First time flying by yourself?" Lena asked as they walked through the terminal. "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied politely. "But I've been on planes 6 times before. My dad says I'm a natural traveler." Lena chuckled. "Well, I can tell you're going to be just fine. You're on Flight 372 to Atlanta, right? That's a nice short flight, just under 2 hours." As they approached the gate, Amara's eyes were drawn to the massive airplane visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She knew from her aviation books that it was a Boeing 737. She had spent hours reading about different planes, memorizing their specs and features. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of aircraft, and she had told her parents that someday she would be a pilot, or maybe even design her own planes. "There she is," Amara whispered to herself, admiring the sleek white body of the aircraft, with its blue and gold trim. She imagined herself in the cockpit, pressing buttons and guiding the massive machine through the clouds. The boarding process began, and as an unaccompanied minor, Amara was allowed to board first along with families, with young children and passengers who needed special assistance. Lena walked her all the way to the aircraft door where a flight attendant with curly hair and a warm smile greeted them. "Hello there. You must be Amara," the flight attendant said, checking the list of unaccompanied minors. "I'm flight attendant May, and I'll be taking care of you during our flight today." Amara shook her hand formally. "Nice to meet you, flight attendant May." May's eyes crinkled with amusement at the girl's seriousness. "Let's get you settled in your seat, shall we? I see you've got 14A. That's a great window seat. You'll have a perfect view for takeoff." Amara nodded enthusiastically as she followed May down the aisle. The plane was still mostly empty, with just a few passengers settling in. The fresh smell of recently cleaned upholstery filled the cabin, mixed with the distinctive airplane air that Amara had come to associate with adventure. When they reached row 14, May helped Amara store her backpack under the seat in front. "Remember to keep your seatbelt fastened whenever you're in your seat, even if the seatbelt sign is off," May instructed. "And if you need anything at all, just press this button here." She pointed to the call button above the seat. "Thank you," Amara said, settling into the window seat. The blue fabric was comfortable, and she immediately tested the reclining feature, just a little bit, before returning the seat to its upright position. "I'll check on you after takeoff," May promised before continuing her duties. Amara pressed, her face against the window, watching the ground crew load luggage and prepare the plane. She took out her travel journal and carefully wrote the date, flight number, and departure time. Then she sketched a quick drawing of the plane, adding little details like the tiny stairs the crew used to reach the cargo hold. As more passengers boarded, the plane gradually filled. A friendly older woman took the aisle seat in Amara's row but left the middle seat empty. She nodded politely at Amara before opening her book. "Is someone sitting here?" Amara asked, pointing to the empty middle seat. "I don't believe so, dear," the woman replied. "Looks like we got lucky." Amara smiled, enjoying the idea of extra space for her journey. She pulled out her own book, a story about a young girl who discovers she can communicate with airplanes, and began reading, occasionally glancing out the window to check on the activity outside. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing an on-time departure. Amara felt a thrill run through her. This was really happening. She was flying all by herself, just like a grown-up. The final boarding call was announced, and the last few passengers hurried onto the plane, just as Amara thought they were about. To close the doors, a man in a dark business suit rushed down the aisle, slightly out of breath. He stopped at her row, checked his boarding pass, and frowned. "Excuse me," he said to no one in particular. "I believe I'm in seat 14B. The middle seat, the one that had been empty until now. Amara scooted a little closer to the window as the man stowed his briefcase in the overhead bin. He was tall with thinning hair and a stern expression that made her think of her school principal. When he sat down, he immediately pulled out a laptop and started tapping away at the keys without so much as a glance in Amara's direction. For a few minutes, everything seemed fine. Amara returned to her book and the man continued working. But then he started sighing heavily and shifting in his seat, as if uncomfortable with the limited space. He glanced at Amara's window seat, then at his own screen, then back at the window. "Excuse me," he said finally, turning toward Amara. "Would you mind switching seats with me? I have some work to finish and the lighting would be better by the window." Amara hesitated, remembering her father's words. "I'm sorry, but my parents specifically got me this seat. It's my first time flying alone and they wanted me to have the window." The man's expression hardened. "Look, I understand, but I'm in the middle of preparing for an important business meeting. I'm sure you'll enjoy the middle seat just as much. You can still see out the window from there." Amara felt her heart beating faster. She didn't want to be rude, but she also knew this was her seat, the one her parents had paid extra for. "I'd really rather stay here if that's okay," she said quietly, trying to sound as polite as possible. The man huffed and looked around, spotting a flight attendant walking down the aisle. He raised his hand to get her attention. "Excuse me, miss," he called out. "I was wondering if you could help us with a seating issue." The flight attendant, different from May, approached with a professional smile. She had short blonde hair and a name tag that read, "Flight Attendant Dana." "Is there a problem, sir?" she asked. "Yes," the man said, gesturing toward Amara. "I was hoping to switch seats with this young lady. I have some important work to finish before we land, and the lighting would be much better by the window. I'm sure she wouldn't mind moving to the middle seat." Dana looked at Amara, who was shrinking back against the window, clutching her book tightly. "Is that something you'd be okay with?" Dana asked her gently. Amara shook her head. "My parents got this seat specially for me," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's my first time flying by myself, and they wanted me to be able to see outside." Dana nodded understandingly, then turned back to the man. "Sir, I'm afraid seat assignments are final unless there's an aircraft weight and balance issue. This young passenger is in her assigned seat." The man's face flushed with annoyance. "It's just a seat change. Surely you can make an exception. I'm a frequent flyer with your airline." "I understand, sir, but I cannot ask another passenger to give up their assigned seat," Dana replied firmly. "If you'd like, I can check if there are any other window seats available on this flight." The man muttered something under his breath and shook his head. "Never mind," he said curtly, turning his attention back to his laptop. Amara let out a small sigh of relief, but she could feel tension radiating from the man beside her. She tried to focus on her book again, but the joy she had felt earlier was now mixed with uneasiness. She wondered if she had done something wrong by not giving up her seat, even though she knew it was hers. As the plane began to push back from the gate, Amara gazed out the window, watching as the ground crews disconnected the jetway and gave final signals to the pilots. Despite the uncomfortable encounter, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement as the engines roared to life and the aircraft began to move. This was still her adventure, and she was determined to enjoy every moment of it, even if the man next to her seemed determined to do the opposite. The seatbelt sign dinged on as the plane pushed away from the gate. Amara felt a flutter of excitement in her stomach as the rumble of the engines grew louder. She pressed her face against the window, watching as the problems, but standing up for yourself might. It does make a difference to me, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I've been looking forward to this for months. The businessman scoffed and pressed the flight attendant call button above his seat. The small overhead light came on and Amara felt her heart sink. She hadn't wanted to cause trouble. Maybe she should just give up her seat and avoid making a scene. But then she remembered how her parents had taught her that sometimes standing your ground was important. Flight attendant Dana appeared at their row, the same one who had helped earlier. How can I assist you? She asked, her professional smile firmly in place. This seating arrangement isn't working, the man stated flatly. I need to switch to the window. The glare in this seat is making it impossible to work, and I have an extremely important presentation to finish before we land. Dana looked at Amara, who was now clutching her book tightly against her chest like a shield. Sir, as I mentioned, before seat assignments are final unless there's an aircraft weight and balance issue, Dana explained patiently. This is ridiculous, the man said, his voice rising slightly. She's what, 8 years old? What possible difference could it make to her where she sits? I'm 10, Amara corrected quietly. Almost 11. The man ignored her. Look, I'm a platinum member with this airline. I fly over 50,000 miles a year with you people. Surely that counts for something. All I'm asking for is a simple seat swap on a 2-hour flight. Dana maintained her composure. Sir, I understand your frustration, but our policy applies to all passengers regardless of status. The young lady has been assigned this seat by her parents who have paid for it. By now, passengers in nearby rows were starting to take notice of the conversation. A woman across the aisle gave Amara a sympathetic smile, while an elderly couple in the row ahead turned around to see what was happening. Can I speak to your supervisor then? The man demanded. This is customer service at its worst. I've never been treated this way on any airline. Dana nodded. Of course, sir, I'll get the lead flight attendant for you. As Dana moved away to find her supervisor, the man turned back to his laptop, mumbling under his breath about entitled kids these days and complete lack of respect. Amara felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had never thought of herself as entitled. If anything, her parents had always taught her to be grateful for what she had and to be considerate of others. She wondered if maybe she was being selfish. After all, the man was trying to work and she was just looking out the window. But then she remembered something her grandmother always said. Your joy matters too, little one. Never let anyone make you feel small for taking up the space that's rightfully yours. The lead flight attendant arrived a few minutes later. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a name tag that read, Flight Attendant Thomas. His presence seemed to command immediate respect, and even the businessman straightened up slightly when he approached. I understand there's an issue with the seating arrangement, Thomas said calmly. Dana has filled me in, but I'd like to hear from both of you directly. The businessman launched into his explanation, emphasizing his elite status with the airline and the importance of his upcoming presentation. He spoke as if Amara wasn't even there, referring to her as the child whenever he mentioned her at all. When he finished, Thomas turned to Amara. And what about you, young lady? What's your take on this? Amara took a deep breath. She wasn't used to adults asking for her opinion in conflicts like this. My name is Amara Johnson, she began, her voice small but clear. This is my first time flying by myself. My parents got me this specific seat because they knew how much I love looking out the window. I've been studying planes and clouds for my science project, and I was hoping to take pictures for my class. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. I see. Thank you for explaining that, Amara. The businessman sighed dramatically. With all due respect, we're talking about a child's entertainment versus an adult's livelihood. I have clients expecting this presentation tomorrow morning. Thomas considered this for a moment. Sir, I understand the importance of your work. Let me check if there are any other window seats available where you might be more comfortable. He pulled out a small tablet and scrolled through what appeared to be a seating chart. We do have one window seat available in row 28. Would you like me to move you there? The man's expression soured further. Row 28? That's all the way at the back of the plane, next to the lavatory. That's completely unacceptable. I'm afraid that's the only window seat currently available, Thomas replied. This is absurd, the man said, his voice rising again. I'm not asking for much here. Just a simple seat swap with a child who probably doesn't even appreciate the view anyway. A woman in the row behind them cleared her throat loudly. Excuse me, she said, leaning forward. I couldn't help overhearing, and I just want to say that the little girl was here first. She has every right to keep her seat. I agree, said the elderly man from the row ahead, turning around again. When I was growing up, we were taught to respect assigned seating, not bully children out of their spots. The businessman's face flushed red. I'm not bullying anyone. I'm simply trying to get some work done on this flight. More passengers were starting to pay attention now, and Amara felt both mortified and oddly supported. She had never been the center of this kind of attention before, and while part of her wanted to disappear into her seat, another part felt strengthened by the unexpected alliance forming around her. Thomas maintained his professional demeanor. Sir, I'm sorry, but I have to insist that we respect the seating assignments. If row 28 doesn't work for you, perhaps we can find another solution for your work needs. We have tray table extenders that might help with the laptop positioning, or perhaps a privacy screen to reduce glare. The man looked around at the faces watching him and seemed to realize he was losing this battle in more ways than one. His posture deflated slightly. Fine, he said curtly. I'll make do with this seat. Thomas nodded. Thank you for your understanding, sir. I'll have Dana bring you that tray table extender and see what we can do about the glare issue. As Thomas walked away, the tension in the air remained thick. Amara wished she could somehow make it better without giving up her seat. She remembered how her dad always said that sometimes the best way to solve a conflict was to find common ground. After gathering her courage for a moment, she turned to the man. I'm sorry about your presentation, she said sincerely. If it helps, I can close the window shade when you need to work on your laptop. We could maybe take turns. The man looked surprised by her offer. He opened his mouth as if to say something. Dismissive, then seemed to think better of it. That's considerate of you, he said finally, though his tone suggested he was more embarrassed than appreciative. Dana returned with the tray table extender and a small anti-glare screen for the man's laptop. These should help with your work, sir, she said, demonstrating how to attach them. While the man was distracted with setting up his new equipment, Dana gave Amara a subtle thumbs up. You doing okay? She whispered. Amara nodded, feeling a bit more confident now. Yes, thank you. The plane had reached its cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing the flying conditions. We're expecting a smooth ride today, folks. Current temperature in Atlanta is 78 degrees with clear skies. We should be arriving right on schedule at 2:15 p.m. local time. Amara pulled out her travel journal again, trying to return to some sense of normalcy. She had planned to document everything about this flight, the takeoff, the clouds, even the snacks they served. She wasn't going to let one unpleasant encounter ruin her experience. But as she glanced at the businessman next to her, who was now typing furiously on his laptop with his new accessories, she couldn't help feeling that this flight had become much more complicated than she'd expected. Her adventure was turning into a lesson about standing up for herself in a world where not everyone would respect her space, or her right to it. Little did she know that the confrontation was far from over. The next phase would reveal things that neither she nor the difficult passenger could have anticipated. The next 30 minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. Amara tried to focus on the clouds outside her window, sketching their shapes in her travel journal and jotting down notes about their different types. She recognized the puffy cumulus clouds her science teacher had taught her about, the kind that looked like cotton balls scattered across the blue sky. But even the beauty outside couldn't fully distract her from the tension inside the cabin. The businessman had reluctantly settled into his work, but his irritation was palpable. Every few minutes he would shift in his seat, sigh heavily, or mutter something under his breath. Whenever Amara moved even slightly, he would glance at her with obvious annoyance, as if her very existence was an inconvenience to him. Amara tried to make herself as small as possible, tucking her elbows in close and being careful not to bump his arm on the shared armrest. She had been so excited about this trip, counting down the days until she could fly by herself like a big kid. Now she just felt anxious, wondering if she had done something wrong by not giving up her seat. Ground crews became smaller figures on the tarmac. This was her favorite part, the moment when the massive machine defied gravity and lifted into the sky. But her enjoyment was cut short by a loud sigh from the man beside her. He had been tapping aggressively at his laptop keyboard for the past few minutes, occasionally shooting glances at Amara's window seat. Now he closed his computer with a snap and turned to face her directly. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "I really need that window seat. I have an important presentation to prepare for, and the glare on my screen is terrible in this middle seat." Amara swallowed hard. She didn't like confrontation and always tried to be helpful, but her parents' words echoed in her mind. They had specifically told her not to give up her seat. They had paid extra for it, chosen it carefully so her first solo flight would be special. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "but my parents got this seat for me because it's my first time flying by myself." The man's expression darkened. "You're just a kid. What difference does it make where you sit? I'm trying to work here." He gestured to his laptop. "This is actual important business, not some little sightseeing trip." Amara's chest tightened. She felt tears threatening to form, but blinked them away. Her mom always said crying wouldn't solve any. Flight attendant. Dana came by with the beverage cart. The tension only increased. "What would you like to drink?" Dana asked Amara with a kind smile. "Apple juice, please." Amara replied softly. Dana poured the juice into a plastic cup and handed it to her along with a small package of pretzels. "Here you go. Careful with that tray table, make sure it's level so your drink doesn't spill." When Dana turned to the businessman, her smile remained professional but noticeably cooler. "And for you, sir?" "Coffee, black," he said curtly, barely, looking up from his laptop. As Dana poured his coffee, the plane hit a small patch of turbulence. The coffee sloshed in the cup and a few drops spilled onto the businessman's sleeve. "For heaven's sake," he exclaimed, jerking his arm away. "Can't you be more careful?" "I apologize, sir," Dana said, quickly offering him a napkin. "We hit an air pocket there." The businessman dabbed at his sleeve, his face reddening. "First I get stuck in this terrible seat and now this. The service on this airline has gone completely downhill." Dana maintained her composure. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience, sir. Would you like another napkin?" "What I'd like," he said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, "is some actual customer service. I want to speak to whoever's in charge of this flight. Not just you. I want to talk to the head flight attendant and the captain if necessary." Amara shrunk further into her seat, wishing she could disappear. Other passengers were staring now, some with expressions of sympathy for Dana, others with obvious irritation at the disruption. "I'll get the lead flight attendant for you right away, sir," Dana said, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the man's rudeness. As Dana moved away, the elderly woman in the row across from them leaned over. "Young man," she said to the businessman, her voice firm but gentle, "you might want to take a deep breath. That flight attendant is just doing her job, and accidents happen to everyone." The businessman turned to the woman, looking as if he was about to say something sharp, but then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he returned to his laptop, typing even more aggressively than before. A few minutes later, Thomas, the lead flight attendant, appeared at their row again. With him was another crew member, a woman with dark curly hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag identified her as Flight Attendant Lily, and the stripes on her uniform indicated she was the purser, the most senior flight attendant on board. "Good afternoon, sir," Lily said. "I understand you wanted to speak with someone in charge. I'm the purser on this flight. How can I help you?" The businessman launched into a litany of complaints, The seating issue, the spilled coffee, what he perceived as Dana's carelessness, and the overall decline in service standards. He spoke rapidly, his voice getting louder with each grievance. And to top it all off, he concluded, "No one seems to care that I'm trying to prepare for a $1 million presentation. Instead, everyone's bending over backward for this child who probably just wants to look at clouds." Amara felt her eyes sting with tears. She hadn't asked for any of this attention. All she'd wanted was to enjoy her first solo flight in the seat her parents had chosen for her. Thomas and Lily exchanged glances, clearly assessing the situation carefully. "Sir," Lily began in a measured tone, "I understand your frustrations, and we do value your business with our airline. However, I need to point out that all passengers, regardless of age, are entitled to their assigned seats. Our policy on this is very clear. And regarding the beverage service," Thomas added, "turbulence can be unpredictable. Dana followed all proper procedures." The businessman scoffed. "So that's it? You're not going to do anything to make this, right? Do you have any idea how much money I spend with this airline every year?" By now, the commotion had drawn the attention of even more passengers. Some were openly watching the exchange, while others pretended to be occupied with books or devices but were clearly listening. A few were whispering to each other, throwing glances in their direction. The co-pilot chose this moment to emerge from the cockpit for a routine cabin check. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a composed demeanor. His uniform was crisp, and his name tag read, First Officer Chen. Noticing the cluster of crew members in the aisle, he approached them. "Is everything all right here?" he asked quietly. Lily filled him in with a few whispered words. The co-pilot nodded and then addressed the businessman. "Sir, I couldn't help overhearing some of your concerns. We take customer satisfaction very seriously at this airline. However, I must emphasize that safety and established policies come first. This includes respecting seat assignments and understanding that occasional turbulence is part of air travel." The businessman was momentarily subdued by the co-pilot's presence, but quickly recovered. "Look, I'm not asking for the world here. All I wanted was a simple seat swap so I could work more effectively. Instead, it's turned into this whole production with half the crew involved." The co-pilot nodded patiently. "I understand your perspective, sir. But consider this from the airline's view. If we allow passengers to pressure others into giving up their assigned seats, it creates an uncomfortable environment for everyone. Each ticket represents a contract, and we're obligated to honor that." "Exactly," came a voice from the row behind. It belonged to a middle-aged woman who had been quietly reading a book until now. "The little girl has every right to keep her seat." Several other passengers murmured in agreement, and Amara felt a strange mix of embarrassment and gratitude. She had never been the center of this kind of attention before. The businessman looked around, seeming to realize for the first time just how many people were watching and judging his behavior. His face flushed deeper. "This is ridiculous," he said, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "I'm being made to look like the villain here for requesting basic customer service." "No one is casting you as a villain, sir," the co-pilot replied calmly. "We're simply adhering to our policies, which are designed to ensure fairness for all passengers." The businessman wasn't ready to back down. "Fine. Then I want this child's full name. I'm going to file a formal complaint about how this entire situation has been handled." The request hung in the air for a moment. Amara felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. Why would he need her name? Was she in some kind of trouble now? Lily looked at Amara with concern. "Young lady, you're traveling as an unaccompanied minor, correct? We have your information in our system already." Amara nodded, her voice temporarily lost. The businessman pressed on. "I still want her name on record for my complaint." Thomas stepped in. "Sir, I don't think that's necessary. If you wish to file a complaint, you can certainly do so without involving the minor's personal details." "I have a right to know who I'm being inconvenienced for," the businessman insisted. The co-pilot exchanged glances with Lily, then made a decision. "Let me check the passenger manifest," he said, pulling out a tablet from his uniform pocket. He tapped the screen a few times, scrolling through what appeared to be a list of names. When he reached Amara's row, he paused, his eyes widening, slightly. "The passenger in 14A is," he began, then stopped, looking at Amara with new interest. "Your name is Amara Johnson Washington?" Amara nodded shyly. "Yes, sir." The co-pilot's professional demeanor remained unchanged, but something subtle shifted in his posture. He glanced at Lily and Thomas, who looked equally surprised. "Is there a problem?" the businessman asked, noting their reactions. "No problem at all, sir," the co-pilot replied smoothly. "I just needed to verify the information." He turned to Amara with a warm smile. "Ms. Johnson Washington, is everything all right with your flight so far apart from this seating discussion?" Amara was confused by the sudden attention and change in tone. Yes, thank you," she replied hesitantly. The co-pilot nodded. "Excellent. Please let us know if you need anything at all." The businessman looked between Amara and the co-pilot, sensing the shift in dynamics but not understanding it. "What's going on here? Why are you suddenly treating her like a VIP?" The co-pilot straightened, his uniform jacket. "Sir, all our passengers receive the same level of respect and care. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to return to the flight deck. Lily and Thomas will ensure that any remaining concerns you have are addressed appropriately." As the co-pilot walked away, he leaned over and whispered something to Lily. She nodded, her eyes widening slightly, then composed herself. "Sir," Lily said to the businessman, "I believe we've addressed your concerns as best we can under the circumstances. Ms. Johnson Washington will remain in her assigned seat, and we'll be happy to provide you with a complaint form if you wish to formalize your dissatisfaction with our service." The businessman looked bewildered by the sudden firmness in her tone. "I don't understand what just happened here. Why is everyone acting so strange suddenly?" Thomas stepped in smoothly. "Nothing strange at all, sir. We're simply following protocol. Now, is there anything else we can assist you with regarding your comfort for the remainder of the flight?" The businessman looked from Thomas to Lily, then at Amara, who was just as confused as he was about the crew's reaction to her name. "No," he finally said, deflated but still visibly irritated. "I guess not." As the crew members dispersed, passengers around them began to whisper amongst themselves. Amara caught fragments of their conversations. "Did you hear that name? Johnson Washington. Isn't that... Could she be related to..." Amara sank lower in her seat, not understanding why her name had caused such a stir. She was just a regular kid, wasn't she? Why had everyone reacted that way when they heard her last name? She pulled out her travel journal again, trying to focus on the clouds outside, but her mind was racing with questions. Whatever was happening, she had a feeling that this flight was about to take an even more unexpected turn. The atmosphere in the cabin changed after the revelation of Amara's last name. Flight attendants, who had previously passed by with simple nods, now stopped to ask if she needed anything. One brought her an extra package of cookies just because, while another made sure her apple juice was refilled without her having to ask. Amara found the sudden attention both confusing and a little uncomfortable. She wasn't used to being treated differently and couldn't understand why her name seemed to matter so much. The businessman, meanwhile, had grown quieter, though his confusion was evident. He kept glancing at Amara when he thought she wasn't looking, as if trying to figure out a puzzle. The change in the crew's behavior hadn't escaped his notice, and it clearly bothered him. About 20 minutes had passed since the confrontation when the captain's voice came over the intercom, making a routine announcement about their flight, path, and expected arrival time. But then he added something unusual. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's come to my attention that we have a special guest on board with us today. While we value the privacy of all our passengers, I want to ensure that everyone on Flight 372 receives the highest quality service. Please don't hesitate to let our flight crew know if you need anything at all to make your journey more comfortable." Amara sank deeper into her seat as several passengers looked around curiously, wondering who the special guest might be. She had a sinking feeling it was somehow related to her, though she couldn't imagine why. She was just a regular fifth grader from Chicago who liked science and airplanes. There was nothing special about that. The businessman finally broke the uncomfortable silence between them. "So," he said in a voice that attempted casualness but came across as strained, "Johnson Washington. That's an interesting last name." Amara nodded without looking at him. "It's my mom and dad's names put together," she said simply. "I see," he replied. "And what do your parents do, if you don't mind me asking?" Amara hesitated. Her parents had always taught her to be careful about sharing too much personal information with strangers, but this seemed like a harmless question. "My mom is a doctor," she said. "She works with airplanes too, making sure they're safe, and my dad works for a company." She deliberately kept it vague the way her parents had taught her. The businessman's eyebrows shot up. "A doctor who works with airplanes, you mean like aviation medicine?" Amara nodded. "Something like that. She checks that planes are safe for people to fly in. She writes lots of rules about it." The businessman's expression changed subtly, a mixture of realization and disbelief crossing his features. "And your father? What company does he work for exactly?" Before Amara could answer, flight attendant Lily appeared at their row again. "Ms. Johnson Washington, the captain was wondering if you might like to visit the cockpit after we land. It's a tradition we have for first-time solo travelers, especially those with an interest in aviation." Amara's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? I can see the cockpit?" Lily smiled warmly. "Absolutely. The captain specifically requested it." The businessman's mouth fell open slightly. "The captain specifically requested it?" he repeated, more to himself than anyone else. Lily turned to him with a professional smile. "Yes, sir. We like to encourage young people's interest in aviation. It's part of our community outreach efforts." The businessman didn't look convinced. "I've flown with this airline for 15 years, and I've never once heard of this tradition for first-time travelers." Lily maintained her composure. "It's a newer initiative, sir, part of our updated family-friendly policies." As Lily moved away, the businessman turned back to Amara with newfound interest. "So, your mother is an aviation doctor who writes safety, regulations, and suddenly the captain is personally inviting you to the cockpit. I'm starting to think there's more to your story than you're letting on, young lady." Amara fidgeted with the edge of her travel journal, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "I don't know what you mean," she said truthfully. "I'm just going to visit my grandparents in Atlanta." The businessman seemed about to say something else when the plane hit another patch of turbulence, a bit stronger this time. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice returned to the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering some light turbulence as we pass through a weather system. Please return to your seats if you're up and about, and keep your seatbelts fastened. Nothing to worry about, just nature's little reminder that we're guests in her sky." The businessman reluctantly fastened his seatbelt and closed his laptop as the plane bounced gently through the air currents. Amara, who had kept her seatbelt on the entire time as her parents had instructed, gripped the armrests tightly. Despite her fascination with planes, turbulence still made her nervous. A flight attendant Amara hadn't seen before hurried down the aisle, checking that everyone was secure. When she reached Amara's row, she paused. "Everything okay here, Ms. Johnson Washington?" she asked with a level of concern that seemed disproportionate to the mild turbulence. "Yes, thank you," Amara replied, still confused by the special treatment. The businessman watched this exchange with growing frustration. As soon as the flight attendant moved on, he turned to Amara again. "Okay, what is going on here? Why is everyone on this plane treating you like you're royalty? First the co-pilot, then the captain's announcement, now this. Who are you?" Amara blinked, genuinely puzzled. "I'm just me. I don't know why they're being so nice." "It's your last name, isn't it?" the businessman pressed. "Johnson Washington. Are your parents someone important? Someone famous?" Amara shrugged uncomfortably. "My parents are just my parents. They're important to me." The businessman wasn't satisfied with this answer. "No, there's definitely something going on here. The entire flight crew changed their behavior the moment they heard your name." Just then, another passenger, a woman in a crisp business suit, seated across the aisle, leaned over. "Excuse me," she said in a low voice. But did I hear correctly that your name is Johnson Washington? Amara nodded hesitantly. The woman's eyes widened with recognition. As in Dr. Elise Johnson and Charles Dye Washington, the aviation safety expert and the new CEO of this airline, the businessman finished, his face draining of color as the pieces finally clicked into place. Charles Washington was appointed CEO last month. I read about it in the business section. And his wife is Dr. Elise Johnson, the aviation safety expert who revolutionized the industry's approach to turbulence management. The woman nodded. They hyphenated their last names after marriage. It was in that profile piece the Times did last year. The businessman sank back into his seat, looking as if he might be sick. I've been arguing with the CEO's daughter. I tried to bully the CEO's daughter out of her seat. Amara stared at them both, surprised that these strangers knew so much about her parents. Yes, her dad had recently gotten a big promotion that meant moving to a new office in a tall building downtown. And her mom did write important safety, rules that made flying safer for everyone. But she had never thought of them as famous or especially important to anyone outside their family. My dad just got a new job, she said simply. And my mom helps make planes safer, that's all. The businessman ran a hand over his face. That's all, he repeated faintly. Your father runs the entire airline we're currently flying on, and your mother practically wrote the book on modern aviation safety protocols. That's all. The woman across the aisle gave Amara a kind smile. Your parents are pretty impressive people in the aviation world, sweetheart. Your mom's work has saved countless lives, and your dad is known for his innovative approach to airline. The management, they're quite the power couple. Amara hadn't thought about her parents that way before. To her, they were just mom and dad, the people who made her pancakes on Sundays and helped with her science projects and tucked her in at night. The idea that they were important or famous to other people felt strange. I didn't know, she said honestly. I mean, I knew Dad got a big new job, but he doesn't talk about work much at home. And Mom's always been writing safety rules. It's just what she does. The businessman was now visibly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact with both Amara and the other passengers who had overheard the conversation. The realization that he had spent the past hour trying to bully the daughter of the airline's CEO and one of the industry's most respected safety experts out of her rightfully assigned seat was clearly sinking in. Listen, he said finally, his voice much quieter and less confident than before. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. I had no idea who your parents were. Amara looked at him curiously. Would it have made a difference if you knew? The question hung in the air, simple but profound. The businessman opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. The woman across the aisle raised an eyebrow, waiting for his answer, along with several other nearby passengers who had been following the drama unfold. Well, of course it would have, the businessman finally admitted, then immediately seemed to regret his words as he saw the expressions on the faces around him. So it's only important to be nice to people if their parents are important? Amara asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. My teacher says we should be kind to everyone, no matter who they are. The businessman's face flushed red again, but for a different reason this time. Shame, not anger, colored his features. Your teacher is right, he said quietly. I didn't. He trailed off, unable to find a justification for his behavior that wouldn't make him sound even worse. The lead flight attendant, Thomas, chose this moment to approach their row again. Ms. Johnson Washington, the captain wanted me to check if you're doing all right. We'll be beginning our descent into Atlanta in about 20 minutes. I'm fine, thank you, Amara replied, still processing everything she had just learned about her parents and why it seemed to matter so much to everyone else. Thomas nodded, then turned to the businessman. Sir, the captain was wondering if you might be more comfortable in an available seat we have in the first-class cabin for the remainder of our flight. One of our passengers received an upgrade, leaving a seat open. The businessman looked stunned by the offer. Yes, that would be, thank you. Thomas gestured for him to gather his belongings. If you'll follow me, sir, I'll show you to your new seat. As the businessman collected his laptop and briefcase, he paused awkwardly, looking at Amara. "I'm sorry for how I behaved earlier," he said, the words seeming difficult for him. "Your parents would be proud of how you handled yourself." Amara nodded, accepting his apology with the simple grace of a child who hasn't yet learned to hold grudges. "That's okay. I hope your presentation goes well." The businessman gave her a small, embarrassed smile before following Thomas toward the front of the plane. As he walked away, Amara heard whispers ripple through the cabin as the story spread from row to row. By now, most passengers seemed aware of who she was, or rather, who her parents were. Amara turned back to the window, watching the clouds drift by below them. She had a lot to think about. She had always seen her parents as just mom and dad, not as important people who made others act differently. She wondered if this was why they had insisted she fly under her full hyphenated name. Even though at school she usually just went by Amara Johnson, she picked up her travel journal again, flipping to a new page. "Today I learned something new about my parents," she wrote carefully. "And I learned that sometimes people treat you differently because of your name, but that doesn't seem right." As she continued writing, she wondered what other revelations this journey might bring, and what her grandparents would say when she told them about everything that had happened. The plane began its descent into Atlanta, tipping gently forward as the pilot guided it down through scattered clouds. Amara pressed her face to the window, watching as the landscape below grew clearer, tiny houses becoming larger, thread-like roads widening into visible highways, and miniature cars growing distinct enough to make out their colors. The businessman had not returned from his upgraded seat in first class, leaving Amara with blessed space and peace for the remainder of the flight. An older woman from a few rows back had taken his empty middle seat with a flight attendant's permission, explaining to Amara that her grandson was about her age and also loved planes. They had chatted comfortably about cloud types and the physics of flight, things Amara had learned from her science books and from listening to her mother talk about her work. "Attention passengers, we are beginning our final approach into Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport," the captain's voice announced over the intercom. "Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing." Amara felt a flutter of excitement in her stomach. She had made it. Her first solo flight was nearly complete, and soon she would see her grandparents waiting for her at the gate. Despite the rocky start with the businessman, she felt proud of herself for standing her ground and completing this journey on her own. As the plane descended further, flight attendant Dana came by to check that Amara's tray table was up and her seatbelt fastened properly. "You did great on your first solo flight," Dana said with a warm smile. "Even with all that unpleasantness earlier, you handled yourself like a true professional." "Thank you," Amara replied, feeling a small glow of pride at the compliment. "It wasn't as scary as I thought it would be," Dana chuckled. "Well, most flights don't involve passengers trying to take each other's seats, but you stood up for yourself beautifully." She lowered her voice a bit. "And between you and me, I had no idea who your parents were until the co-pilot mentioned it. That wasn't why I supported you with the seat issue. That was just the right thing to do." This made Amara feel better. She hadn't liked the idea that people were only being nice to her because of who her parents were. "My parents always tell me that everyone deserves respect," Amara said. "Not just important people." Dana nodded approvingly. "Your parents sound very wise, and they've clearly raised a remarkable young lady." She gave Amara's shoulder a gentle pat before continuing down the aisle to check on other passengers. The plane dipped lower, gliding over the sprawling Atlanta airport with its multiple runways and terminals. Amara felt the subtle shifts as the aircraft aligned itself for landing. She had read about this part in her aviation books, how pilots used their instruments and visual cues to bring the massive machine safely to the ground. With a slight bump and the screech of tires meeting tarmac, the plane touched down. Amara bounced slightly in her seat, grinning with excitement. They had landed. The engines roared as the pilot engaged the reverse thrusters, slowing the aircraft as it raced down the runway. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Atlanta," the captain announced as the plane taxied toward the terminal. Local time is 2:17 p.m. and the temperature is a pleasant 77 degrees. On behalf of the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for flying with us today. As passengers began gathering their belongings and preparing to deplane, Thomas, the lead flight attendant, appeared at Amara's row. "Ms. Johnson Washington," he said with a smile, "if you'll wait until the other passengers have deplaned, I'll escort you to the cockpit as promised, and then to meet your grandparents at the gate." Amara nodded eagerly, her previous discomfort at the special treatment forgotten in the excitement of getting to see the cockpit, a rare privilege in these days of tight security. As she waited for the plane to empty, the woman who had taken the businessman's seat leaned over. "You know," she said in a grandmother's wise voice, "when I was your age, people didn't think little black girls could grow up to be important in aviation. Your mother helped change that, and it looks like you're following right in her footsteps. Keep reaching for those clouds, honey." Amara hadn't thought about it that way before. Her parents had always told her she could be anything she wanted to be, and she had never questioned it. But the woman's words made her sit up a little straighter, feeling the weight of something bigger than herself. Once the other passengers had filed out, Thomas led Amara to the front of the plane. The cockpit door was open, and inside the captain and co-pilot were completing their post-flight checks. "Captain Rivera, this is Amara Johnson Washington, our special passenger," Thomas introduced. The captain turned in his seat, removing his sunglasses with a warm smile. "Well, hello there. I hear you're quite the aviation enthusiast." Amara nodded, momentarily speechless at the sight of all the instruments and controls. It was even more impressive than her books had shown. "Come on in," the captain invited, gesturing to the space beside him. "First solo flight, right? How was it?" "It was amazing," Amara said, finding her voice. "Except for the part where someone tried to take my seat." The co-pilot, First Officer Chen, chuckled. "Yes, we heard about that. Not everyone would have the courage to stand their ground like you did. My parents always say it's important to speak up when something isn't right," Amara replied. The captain nodded. "Your parents are wise people. Your mother's safety protocols are the gold standard in our industry, you know. Every time we have a smooth flight through turbulence, we have her research to thank. And your father," added the co-pilot, "has already made impressive changes to how this airline operates. His focus on both passenger experience and employee well-being has been refreshing." Amara felt a burst of pride hearing strangers speak so highly of her parents. At home, her dad still burned the toast sometimes, and her mom still mixed up the names of Amara's friends. They were just regular parents to her. But here, in this cockpit, she caught a glimpse of who they were to the rest of the world. "Would you like to sit in the captain's seat?" Captain Rivera offered, standing up. Amara's eyes widened. "Really? Is that allowed?" "Well, we're parked safely at the gate, all systems are powered down, and we're making an exception for the daughter of two people who've done so much for aviation safety in this airline." He winked. "Just don't tell the TSA." Amara carefully climbed into the captain's seat, marveling at all the gauges, screens, and controls surrounding her. She placed her hands tentatively on the yoke, imagining what it would be like to guide this massive machine through the sky. "How does it feel?" asked the co-pilot. "Like I'm sitting in the future," Amara breathed. "Someday I want to fly planes too." "Well, with your genetics and that determination I saw today, I have no doubt you will," Captain Rivera said. "Maybe you'll even fly for this airline someday." After taking a photo of Amara in the captain's seat, with her permission to share with her parents, Thomas escorted her off the plane and through the terminal to meet her grandparents. As they walked, he explained something that had been confusing her. "You know, we didn't give you special treatment just because of who your parents are," he said. "When we first heard your name, yes, we were surprised. But what really impressed us was how you handled yourself during that confrontation, with dignity and maturity beyond your years. That's what earned our respect." Amara thought about this. "So it wasn't just because my dad is the CEO?" Thomas shook his head. "That got our attention, certainly. But no, it was watching you stand up for yourself politely but firmly. That businessman was in the wrong and you knew it, but you never lost your composure or your kindness. That's a rare quality in passengers of any age. As they approached the gate area, Amara spotted her grandparents right away. Her grandmother was wearing her favorite purple dress, and her grandfather had on his usual cap with fishing hooks attached to it. They were scanning the crowd anxiously until they saw her, their faces lighting up with joy. "There's my brave girl," her grandmother called out, opening her arms wide. Amara ran the last few steps, throwing herself into her grandmother's embrace. The familiar smell of her perfume, something flowery and warm, made Amara feel instantly at home. "How was your flight, Sunshine?" her grandfather asked, taking her backpack and giving her shoulders a gentle squeeze. "It was interesting," Amara replied, not sure where to begin. Thomas approached and introduced himself to her grandparents. "Your granddaughter handled herself beautifully on her first solo flight," he told them. "We had a minor seating issue, and she stood her ground with remarkable poise." Her grandmother nodded knowingly. "That sounds like our Amara. She's got her mother's backbone and her father's diplomacy." After Thomas said goodbye and returned to prepare for the next flight, Amara walked hand in hand with her grandparents toward the baggage claim area, telling them about her adventure. "And then they all got really weird when they heard my last name," she explained. "People kept whispering and looking at me. I didn't know Mom and Dad were so important." Her grandfather chuckled. "Your parents didn't tell you, did they? They wanted you to have this experience on your own terms, not as the airline CEO's daughter. Your father called us last night," her grandmother added. "He said they deliberately didn't make a fuss about who you were when they booked your ticket. They wanted the airline staff to treat you like any other unaccompanied minor." "But why?" Amara asked, confused. Her grandfather's eyes twinkled with wisdom. "Because they wanted you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Sunshine. To know your worth isn't in your last name, but in your courage to stand up for yourself." "And they were right," her grandmother said proudly. "From what that flight attendant said, you did exactly that, before anyone even knew who your parents were." Amara thought about this as they rode the escalator down to baggage claim. She had stood her ground not because she was Charles and Elise, Johnson Washington's daughter, but because she was Amara, a person who deserved respect just like everyone else. "I think that's the best lesson from this whole adventure," she said finally, "that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter who they are or who their parents are." Her grandparents exchanged proud glances over her head. "That's exactly right, Sunshine," her grandfather said, squeezing her hand. "And I think that's a lesson that businessman learned today too." As they walked through the busy airport, Amara felt taller somehow. Her first solo flight had taught her more than just how to navigate an airport or manage on her own. It had shown her that she had strength inside herself that had nothing to do with her famous last name, a quiet dignity and determination that was all her own. And that, she decided as she walked out into the warm Atlanta sunshine with her grandparents, was the most important discovery of all.